What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with a CGC graded Star Wars comic book market update. And at the request of some subscribers, I included a couple of 9.6 graded items in here so we could take a look at prices and as they compare to 9.8 grades. And the difference in price is not the same for every book, right? Every book has its own story, has its own census. And when I say census, I'm referring to the population report of those comics on CGC's website. You can look up any book and take a look at how many books have been graded at each grade. And a lot depends on rarity, how rare it is, how plentiful it is, how easy it is to get a 9.8 grade. If the book has a lot of dark colors or if it had a lot of manufacturing defects. And we're going to talk about all that stuff in this video. The Star Wars comic book market update that I'm providing today, it kind of talks about everything from upcoming Disney Plus content all the way to vintage books, Dark Horse comics. So without further ado, let's dig right in. Here's a book that's really interesting and I just kind of discovered here recently, and I didn't waste any time. I picked it up. And this is a 9.6 grade for Star Wars number 21 from March of 1979. And I didn't know much about this book, but it's a great cover. It has Darth Vader kind of shaking his fists like, "Get off my lawn," to C-3PO, R2-D2, Luke Skywalker, and Leia, and it's got that classic kind of 1970s vibe to the cover. It's just a really great cover. It says Shadow of a Dark Lord. And this one is the 9.6 grade. And what's interesting about this book, and I didn't know this, but this is the first original Darth Vader story. So, you know, everything else preceding this book, 1 through 20, was kind of adaptation type stuff. And this would be the first actual original story in comics for Darth Vader. And I saw a 9.8 for this one come up at auction, and I went ahead and bought it. But this is a 9.6. This one sold for $119.49 plus shipping. So let's call it about $135, $136. Now, for comparison's sake, I paid quite a bit more for my 9.8 grade. And I looked at the census for this one, and there's only about 80 or 90 or so graded in the 9.8 grade. And I think a lot of it has to do with the really dark cover. You know, it's got a lot of dark that from the background and from Darth Vader that can show every single little spine tick. So it's just a lot more difficult to get a 9.8 grade for this specific book, as well as a few others we're going to talk about. And but I did pay quite a bit more for my 9.8 grade versus the 9.6. Now, practically speaking, another question I get from subscribers is, what's the difference between a 9.6 and a 9.8? And again, it depends on the book, but you know, usually if there's one or two color-breaking spine ticks along this left edge of the book, it's going to be impossible to get a 9.8 grade. And the width of those is about 1/8 of an inch or more. And if you can see the white showing through from the original cover, you know, a 9.8 is going to be pretty impossible to get. And occasionally I'll have a couple of books in my collection that are 9.8 grade that do have color-breaking spine ticks. So it just depends on the book. It also depends on the grader. You know, not every grader is going to catch everything. So, you know, for reference, this one sold for about, let's call it $140. I paid about 3.5 times that amount for the 9.8 for the same book. But this is one to look out for because it doesn't come up that often. And now that I know that this is the first original Darth Vader story, it's just kind of a cool piece of collecting history. And you can see right here, it's hard to show it here, but maybe it might come up on that top left corner where you see Luke Skywalker there is a color-breaking spine tick right in here. And that probably precluded this one from getting the 9.8. The rest of it looked pretty clean overall. But if you see one of those in a raw book and you're like, hey, I'm going to send this in to get graded, just be aware that if you see any of those color-breaking spine ticks, it's going to be really tough to get a 9.8 grade. Here's another one in my collection. This is a 9.8 for Star Wars number 71, and this is the first full appearance of Bossk the Bounty Hunter. Now, it doesn't have Bossk on the cover, which is probably the biggest negative of this book, but otherwise, it's a fantastic cover. It says The Quest for Han Solo, and it shows Han Solo in carbonite with Lando and Luke kind of guarding him. And, you know, this is just a great cover. And you know, this one sold for $275 plus $15 shipping. I actually paid a little bit more for my example. I think I paid closer to $300. So maybe you can chalk that up to an overpay on my end, but this is the direct edition. There are obviously newsstand editions that go for about $350. I paid closer to $300 for my direct edition, but it's just another book to keep in mind, because I think Bosk at some point is going to make an appearance. We already know that Forlom is coming to the Obi-Wan series, so I don't see why they wouldn't bring back more bounty hunters eventually, potentially even in the Obi-Wan series. So we'll see, but you know, there was a mention in the trailer for the Inquisitorius working with bounty hunters to try and identify where Obi-Wan is and to bring him in as part of the purging of the Jedi. And that's going to be kind of the main topic, I think, for the Obi-Wan series. But this was a beautiful book, and I think that was a pretty good deal. Next up, we had a really good deal on Star Wars Republic number 51. This is a Dark Horse comic from 2003. Great cover with Anakin and Obi-Wan on the cover. Graveyard Moon is the title of this book. This is the first full comic book appearance of Dirge the Bounty Hunter. So again, whether we see Dirge or not, who knows, but Marvel recently brought him back to Star Wars canon within the modern run, within Dr. Aphra. I believe it's number, I can't remember the number now. I think it's Dr. Aphra number 17 is volume 3. But this one sold for $215. That's a pretty good deal right there for Dirge the Bounty Hunter. I think Dirge has got a future within, certainly he's within the modern comic run, but I think that he's got a future within live action content as well. Okay, now this is a great comparison, going back to what I started the video about, showing different grades. And this is a 9.6 grade for Darth Vader number 3. I believe this is from volume 1. Don't quote me on that, but this is the first appearance of Dr. Aphra, along with her 2 droids. This is the 1:25 ratio variant by Laraka. The cover's by Laraka. Great cover. Kind of an homage to when Luke was fighting Vader on Bespin, and you can see him reaching out his hand there. It's just an awesome cover. I would love to get this one at a 9.8 grade. But this was a 9.6. It sold for $1,000 plus $25 shipping. Now, what do you think the 9.8 sold for? You can imagine it's quite a bit more, and it was. This one just sold in a 9.8 at auction. It sold for $2,031 plus $50 shipping. So to go from a 9.6 to a 9.8 grade for this book, you're looking at over double the price. And again, the reason is that there's a lot of black on this cover, a lot of black. So it's just really tough to get, especially along that bottom half of the book. It's really tough to get the 9.8 grade. And you can see right here on the staple that there is a pretty noticeable color breaking spine tick. And that's probably what kept this book from getting the 9.8 grade. The other thing to keep in mind is around this time frame, on the back of this book, it had a Black Series Star Wars Hasbro action figure ad with Vader and Luke Skywalker kind of fighting, the 2 action figures. That back is really dark for a lot of the Marvel books from around this time period. And it gets a lot of color rub. And you know, that color rub could have come just from shipping the books from the printer to the various local comic shops. So a lot of the books around this time frame are really tough to get in a 9.8 grade, but you can see the massive price premium you go from a 9.6 to a 9.8 for that book specifically. At the same time as that book was being sold, all of the different printings for Darth Vader number 3 with Dr. Aphra's first appearance all sold. The first print sold for $377 plus $20 shipping. The second print sold for $260. And the reason for the price difference for this is while there are fewer of 9.8s for the second print versus the first print, it's a lot easier to get a 9.8 grade because as you can see, it's got a red cover, so it maybe hides a lot of the flaws a lot easier than this one where you know, there's quite a bit more chance to show the spine ticks. It's a little bit darker with that purple. So again, the second print got fewer 9.8s, but it's also a lot cheaper because it's a lot easier to get the 9.8 grade. The third and fourth prints were very, very short print runs, and the price point again reflects that. So it's $410 for the third print, and then the fourth print is easily got the shortest print run, and it always commands the biggest money with the exception of the 1/25 Laraka variant. That one sold for $910. So this has got a purple cover, and while maybe not as dark as the first print, it's just there's so few of these printed that you're going to have to pay quite a bit more money versus the first print for Darth Vader number 3. It's just, I don't remember the exact print number, but it was a substantial drop off in the number printed. And I love that purple, that kind of bright purple color for this one as well. Another book that we've talked about in the past is Dr. Aphra #1. This is volume 1 from 2017. This is her first solo comic book series. And it's a great cover with Black Chrysanthemum as well as the 2 murder droids on the cover. And there's Dr. Aphra there. This is a book I definitely want to pick up at some point. And it's kind of still hovering around $190 to about $220. This seller had 6 of them, and 5 of them have sold. It was $220 with free shipping. That's about the max I would pay for this book, but this is definitely one on my want list, and it's just a fantastic cover. And it kind of mirrors whenever Dr. Aphra makes her appearance in live-action content, this book is going to skyrocket, but it's always going to skyrocket less than her first appearance comic, Darth Vader #3. But if you can't afford Darth Vader #3, which again starts around, at the low end, you can probably pick it up for $260 for the second print. But if you don't want to spend that much, then go to her first solo series, and this is one that I really want to pick up to kind of mirror or to kind of match with my first and second prints of Darth Vader #3. It's just a great cover, and I think it's one to have in your collection if you're a Dr. Aphra fan. And another one that I would take a look at is Dr. Aphra Annual #1. This has got a very, very small census number. There's not many of these on the census. I forgot to look up the number on CGC's website, but it's under 100. I know that. It's a very, very small number. And what's important about this book is that this is the origin story for Black Chrysanthemum. It's a really cool cover. Not as cool, in my opinion, as Dr. Aphra #1, her first solo series. It's a little bit more cartoony, in my opinion. It's not quite my kind of style to art. But it's just so rare. It's so hard to find this one. I've only seen maybe 2 or 3 of these sell in the last 6 months. They just never come up. And I didn't see this one come up. I just found this in the sold listings. I would have been very tempted on this book. But it was pretty high. It was $360. So if I'm going to spend $360 for Black Chrysanthemum's origin story versus getting his first full comic book appearance for about 30 to 40% less, I would probably take the first appearance comic. But this one is a lot more rare, so that's why people are willing to pay up for this book. Next up, we'll do a comparison again for a 9.6 grade versus a 9.8 grade for Rogue One Adaptation #1. And this is a book I've already beat to death many times in past videos, but this is the first comic book appearance of K2SO, Cassian Andor, Director Krennic, Saw Gerrera, and Jyn Erso. It's just an awesome book and one I'd really look at. Now, if you can't afford the 9.8, a 9.6, which is only a slight step down in quality, is way cheaper, way cheaper. This one sold for $47. $47 plus $14 shipping. That's a good deal. And if you compare that to the 9.8 is $100. This one just sold at auction for $163.50 plus $15 shipping. And another one sold for $180 plus $17.50 shipping. So it's a massive price premium that you got to pay to go from a 9.6 to a 9.8. But if your budget doesn't allow for a 9.8, a 9.6 is perfectly adequate, and it's a lot cheaper on your budget. So take a look at that. But this is a book that I think is going to continue to go up. There's obviously a number of other covers for this book, and this is the cheapest one. There's a darker, blacker cover that I believe is a 1:10 ratio, and I think there's also a 1:25 ratio variant, and that one's extremely expensive. You're talking almost $1,000 for that one. And there's also a Walmart variant that is also pretty expensive. So take a look and kind of just look at your budget and look at what you want, and then look at the grade versus the cover and things like that. But that's a book that I think is going to go up. It's going to go up, especially as Cassian Andor hype starts to go into the stratosphere, because that series, I'm telling you, that series is going to be really good. It's going to be awesome. I'm more excited about that than probably any other series coming up right now on Disney+. Star Wars Solo Adaptation #1. This is another really good book. This is the first appearance of Kira, as well as Dryden Voss. It's also the first appearance of the young Lando, and we know that he's got a series coming. This was a 9.6 grade. That sold for $64.51 plus $14 shipping. Now, I didn't pull up a 9.8 grade for this book, but roughly this book goes for between $225 and $275 in a 9.8 grade. So as you can see, it's about 4 times more expensive to go from a 9.6 to a 9.8 grade for this book. So again, just match it up with your budget, and if you don't want to spend the money on a 9.8 then get a 9.6. This was a fantastic deal on Kanan the Last Padawan #1. This is the first cameo appearance of the Rebels team and the first full appearance of Kanan Jarrus. And you can see it says first appearance of Kanan Jarrus and the Rebels team on the label, but this is really just the first cameo. As I've talked about in past videos, Kanan #6 is the first full appearance and the one that really gets the big money. But this one sold, it was listed for $250 and it sold for $225. So it's really come back down. It hit a peak of about $400, and $225 is a screaming deal for this one. It's a good value, but you know, again, if you've got the budget, definitely go for Kanan #6. But if you can't afford that and you want to get a 9.8 and have some exposure to Sabine Wren, who's going to be having a big role within the Ahsoka series. She's basically going to have the second biggest role other than probably Ahsoka in the series. So I really think Kanan 1 and Kanan #6 are at their absolute bottoms right now. And if you can pick them up, great. Kanan #6 goes for about $600 in a 9.8. In a 9.6, I've seen it sell for $200 to $250. So just be on the lookout for those books. Now let's talk about a few key books as it relates to the Obi-Wan series. I try to avoid buying books leading up to the series because that's when they're at the absolute peak, is when the trailers are starting to drop and excitement is starting to build for the Obi-Wan series. You're going to be paying a lot more than hopefully you'll be paying 2 or 3 months after the series is done and over with and people have moved on to something else. But if you are looking for some of the key books related to the Obi-Wan series, take a look at Darth Vader #19, and this is from volume 2, I believe. This is from 2018. And it's a great cover. It's got Darth Vader with an homage to the Star Wars A New Hope poster. And it's got Emperor Palpatine in the background there. This is the first appearance of the second sister. This is the first cameo appearance of the second sister, who's one of the Inquisitorius. This one sold for $102.50 at auction. That was a great deal. Usually they're listed by it now for about double that price. So if you can pick it up in an auction for about $100 or a little bit over that, that's a good deal. And then if you want the first appearance of Sarah Junda, as well as the first full appearance of the second sister, that is Jedi Fallen Order Dark Temple #1. This is tied to a video game, Jedi Fallen Order. This is the standard cover. Pretty decent cover, not nearly as cool as the 1:10 ratio variant, which I'm going to show you in a second. But in a 9.8 grade, this sold just at auction on May 14th for $87 with free shipping. That is a fantastic deal. And I didn't bid on it because I don't want to spend any money, but I was watching that one pretty closely. But again, this is about half the price of where it's usually listed. Usually it's listed by it now for $175 to $225. But if you want to get the 1:10 ratio variant, this is the one to get. This has got a very small census population for 9.8s because look how dark that cover is. That is a very, very dark cover. And again, it's the 1:10 ratio variant. And not many of these on the census. That one sold for $338. So again, people are willing to pay more, not only because it's a 1:10 ratio variant and there's fewer than printed, but there's also fewer 9.8 grades for this book just because it's so dark of a cover. But again, $338 took that one home. Next up, we had a pretty cool one. This was Vader Down, but it was signed by Hayden Christensen, who obviously is going to be reprising his role within the Obi-Wan series. So pretty cool to see a signed book there. And his signature commands big money. He doesn't do a ton of autographs like some of the other people out there, like Ashley Eckstein. She makes the circuit, right? She goes to a lot of different conventions. Her signature does command big money because she's so popular. But Hayden Christensen's a pretty popular autograph to have too. And in a 9.8 grade, that's a nice book to have. Great cover there. And that one sold for $989. So you're going to be paying big money for an autographed book by Hayden Christensen in a 9.8 grade. Next up, I need to apologize because I had a what to buy video here last week, and I said Star Wars Legacy #16 was a good one to look at if you're into the Obi-Wan series. It's a great cover, and it talks about Obi-Wan's kind of storyline and adventures as they take place between Order 66 and A New Hope. And this is a great cover, but I was looking at a buy it now that was like $200. This one just sold in an auction for $89 plus $15 shipping. So clearly I was way off, and luckily nobody bought it. But man, that is a fantastic fire sale price. I would have paid that all day long for this book. It's just a fantastic cover. So try to get it for about $100 or a little bit over that after accounting for shipping. But Star Wars Legacy number 16 is one to look at. High Republic Adventures number 2. This is the first full appearance of Marchion Ro. This book has come back down to earth a little bit, and now's a pretty good time to pick this book up if you're looking for it. It's also the first full appearance of Lula Taliasola. She's a Jedi. And but again, the reason you want this book is it's a first full appearance of Marchion Ro. This one hit kind of $225 to $250. And this one has come back down to $155 or so, plus $16 shipping. So try to pick it up in that $150 price point. There's also a 1-in-10 ratio variant that goes for about $200 or so. Finally, I wanted to talk about this book, and I think I've talked about it, but if I haven't, now's a good time to do it. This is the second printing for Star Wars High Republic number 7. This is the first full appearance of Darth Krall, and this is also his first, this is his second cover appearance. His first cover appearance was the same book, High Republic number 7, but in the first printing, the Mike Mayhew cover variant. But this is a great book. But what's important about this book, and what I alluded to at the beginning of this video, is that sometimes the printers have big errors, where a huge batch of the books have major printer errors. And this is one of those books, the second printing for High Republic number 7. A bunch of these had defects, and a bunch of them got scrapped. So this book does not have a big print run in terms of 9.8 quality books. I ordered like 10 of these because I thought this book would be a good one to get, and all 10 of them were ruined. So luckily the seller, ANZ Comics, who I work with pretty closely with any kind of new release comics, he's like, sorry man, all these books are garbage, I'm refunding you, and he sent them back to the printer. So if you see this one come up, just be aware that you're going to be paying pretty good money for it. This one hit a high of $240. It's since come back down to earth a little bit, but $140 to $150, $160-ish is going to be the going rate for this book because there's just not many of them out there in the 9.8. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this look at recent books, both 9.6 as well as 9.8 graded Star Wars comics, everything from vintage to recent releases. And there's going to be a lot more coming, I think, as we get into the Obi-Wan series in the next 2 weeks. I think we'll probably see more first appearances on Disney Plus content, and as a result, some surprising books will probably hit big money prices, just like when Black Chrysanthemum made his first appearance in Disney content. All of those books went stratospheric, and they've of course since come back down to earth. So you got to time your purchases carefully. Look at books that are not going to be Obi-Wan related right now, because anything Obi-Wan related you're going to be paying a lot of money for. Thanks again, and I'll be back soon.